Good morning. Oh, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's an exciting day, and there's been a lot of work to get us here today. My name is John Barrows. I'm Chief of Economic Development for the City of Boston, and I'm proud to be standing up here for a day that marks real progress in equity within our economic growth. And there's been a lot of partnerships. I'm allowed the mayor to talk about that. That's got us here today, because my job is simple. My job is to say welcome and then bring up the mayor of the city, who at one point pulled a lot of us in and said, we want Boston to be a leader in terms of how we address equity, particularly in this new emerging industry. And then threatened to fire us if we didn't get it right. Working with the council and the councilor particularly, but I'm gonna let him talk about that, and I wanna bring up Mayor Walsh, the mayor of the City of Boston. Let's hear it for our mayor.
Thank you, John. And let me just start by thanking Councilor Janey and the collaboration with the City Council, Councilor Nisasabi George as well, with the collaboration. We have met several times over the last several months, a lot of times over the last several months, but at the end of the day, what the product looks like is what I'm going to explain here in a minute, how we create bold change. The legal cannabis industry in Massachusetts is brand new. There was no real roadmap on to what we're doing here. We went around the country and kind of looked to Denver as an opportunity, and out in Colorado on how we'd set something like this up. When we set up our office, Alexis Kachuk is here. Alexis is the person who runs our office. We started to think about how do we take in applications with the importance of keeping equity at the forefront. We had Jerome Smith involved in the process, who was the kind of coordinated outreach person. And come on, Councilor. How do we do our community engagement and our community meetings? And Jerome Smith and Office of Neighborhood Services was kind of the outreach there. Then we talked about creating this industry and how do we assist people in the industry, and we did it through economic development with John Barrows. We didn't really have a mechanism right off the bat on how we're going to do it. We didn't have money how to create it. So when I think about where we came from as an industry, cities and towns in the Commonwealth were never given a roadmap. When this was passed by the voters, the legislature kind of created the Cannabis Control Commission. And the commission kind of was in charge of the last, if you will, the last stop in setting up the beginning of this industry in Massachusetts. And we looked at all we've done, and I think today we have a tremendous opportunity to regulate this industry and what we've learned in the short time that we've been doing it, and what we've learned from watching other cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who have created something in boards. Not many of them approved anything. I think we have two. Is there two approved in the Commonwealth? I mean, two that are open in the Commonwealth right now, and we're moving forward. So this has been kind of a slow and steady process, and this process needs to be done right. And, you know, a lot of people talked about other cities and towns and what they've done and what they're able to create with the cannabis industry, but they never opened a shop. They haven't even approved an industry yet. And and different people are referencing different cities and towns in Massachusetts. This is the way to do it. They haven't opened one yet, and we've gone way down the road here. So I think we have an opportunity here in Boston to unlock economic opportunities in our neighborhoods, to create a standard of equity across not just Boston, not just Massachusetts, but across the entire country. Because what I'm about to sign and what was passed and what we worked on is landmark when it comes to cannabis and the industry here in the country, not just here in Boston or Massachusetts. We're going to create a Boston Cannabis Board. It's going to evaluate and vote on license applications publicly using criteria. We're going to be working towards that goal. That's our next goal that we're going to be doing next. The board members are going to represent the diversity of our city and our neighborhoods. They'll have lots of experience with the community engagement and sound business practice, and we have the beginning workings of what we want to see there. But again, we're creating something brand new here when we create this board, and we want to make sure when we create the board that it's done right. It's not done quick. And the council and myself spoke to get this ordinance passed, and we put in the language specifically in there that the mayor shall create a cannabis board. So that means it's going to happen, and we're going to make sure that happens, and we're going to be working on that right now as we move forward. This ordinance that I'm about to sign today helps right the wrongs of the past. Certainly since the 1970s, the American war on drugs has been devastating to a lot of people, but most importantly, the communities of color. And there's no secret, and I don't really have to say that to people, but I think we have to acknowledge it as much as possible as we continue to move forward. Across the country, people of color have been disproportionately arrested for low-level drug crimes over the past 4 or 5 decades, quite honestly. It contributed to the cycle of poverty and pain that have persists for generations. And a lot of people now are recognizing that and saying that. We've heard it for the last, presidential campaigns, probably the last 8 years. We've heard that conversation. But we have an opportunity here in Boston to undo some of that damage, not just talk about it and acknowledge it and recognize it, but actually undo the damage that was done. We're going to make sure that the communities that were hit the hardest by these policies benefit the most from the new economic opportunities. Something that was, I think, quite honestly, a lot of reason why the law passed in the first place with the voters of Massachusetts when it was explained. We're creating the Boston Cannabis Equity Program to support applicants who have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. This program includes technical assistance. This is money that we put aside at the behest of the councilor during the budget process last year to provide technical assistance and legal compliance. We're also creating a fund to provide the resources for applicants. Equity in the marijuana industry has been a priority of this administration for a long time. We actually put $500,000 in the last year's budget that was voted on by the City Council. We're going to be matching the next 500 out of the revenue, the first 3% of revenue that's coming. All of that is going right into this equity fund till we get to $1 million. And then we will start taking 1% of the equity revenue going into the fund and 2% into the general fund, which we'll be using for other things. So we're going to be doing that here in the city. We can explain that later to anyone who wants to know specifics about it. Ever since the people of Massachusetts voted to legalize recreational marijuana, we've worked to make the law implemented in the right way. We created the Office of Emerging Industries. We also are the first city in America to have approved economic empowerment applicants. I just want to be clear on that. We're the first city in Massachusetts to have state-approved economic empowerment applicants, and since that time, we have 2 more. So we have 3 in the city of Boston, which is good stuff. We have been very deliberate in our efforts to promote racial diversity in the industry. In fact, one of the first and only cities in the nation to include race in equity designations here in Boston, Massachusetts, which is another nice win. We hope more cities will be modeling what we did here and what we're doing here in Boston to make it a nationwide mandate, and quite honestly, a statewide mandate, not just nationwide, but here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there's plenty, some other cities and towns that will be able to look and see what we did here. This ordinance is one of many steps taken to make our economy more inclusive. What we're trying to do here, and we're working to create pathways into the middle class, especially for women and people of color, with job training, free community college, small business support, home ownership. I recently just signed an executive order about procurement, which will help ensure business enterprise have equal access to contracts in the city. Again, as I said the day I signed it, it's a piece of paper with my signature on it. And unless action is taken on it, it's just going to be a piece of paper with my signature on it. So we can celebrate the signing of it, but if it's not, something doesn't happen on it, it doesn't work. At the same time, we're working on dismantling prison pipelines through our Office of Returning Citizens. I don't see Kevin Sibley here, but Kevin is doing some great work on this. We're making unprecedented investments in recovery and addiction services on top of all that we've done. Crime is down significantly and arrests are down as well, but there's still too many people caught up in a horrible cycle. a cycle, I would say a cycle of poverty, which turns into a cycle of violence. And we have to continue to move forward. We also, with the governor today, Representative Holmes and myself, and City Councilor Nisabi George, and City Councilor Matt O'Malley, where we just signed the new act into place for additional funding, about $1 billion of new revenue into our schools, which will be roughly $14 million a year for Boston over the next 7 years. So again, it's about creating opportunities for our young people to put them on a path to success. All of what we talked about, all of what I'm talking about today, and I'm going to bring the councilor up in a second, is about creating structural change. We're going to continue to invest in bold, progressive reforms that lift people up. That's something that is so important to us. We need to work together to show a better way forward, and today is a big step in that direction. I want to thank all the partners in the room here today for your continued efforts and persistence. I don't know if that's the right word or whatever the word is, but I want to thank you. And now, again, before I bring the councilor up, I just want to thank Matt O'Malley, Anissa Sabi George, the other members of the council down here, and Councilor Janey, who's going to come up here in a minute. There's a lot of talk about politics today and about, you know, the council and the role of the council and the role of the mayor and the role of the council, the role of the mayor, the role of the council, the role of the mayor. And the press that's here loves to write about it and what's going on. A government that's successful and a government that works is a government that's collaborative. And we've watched what's happened in Washington over the last 25 years, and we watched a government in Washington that doesn't collaborate. When you can't agree on anything together, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, that hurts our democracy. And we need to continue to collaborate together. At one point in my life, I was a state representative. I was one of 160 voices. But I felt that when I spoke about an issue, my voice was the most important voice in that chamber at that time. And that's how we need to look at it. Everybody that's here today in elective office goes on the ballot just like I do. And I think that I want to congratulate the councilor who's done tremendous amounts of work on this. This was her priority. She came to me a couple years ago when she got elected and said, this is going to be one of my priorities. And she stuck to it and stayed with it and understood, working collectively with the administration and working with the council and working with the advocates, that we all decided, how do we make this work? At the end of the day, I think the product that's here today is better than the product I had in the beginning and better than the product that she had in the beginning. It's a better product for all of us. City Councilor Kim Janey.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I want to build on this notion of collaboration. The mayor is absolutely right that it takes all of us collaborating, and I want to thank you, Mayor, for your leadership, for your partnership, for your collaboration in this work. Together, the mayor and the council are taking a very important step forward, so I want to acknowledge that. Thank you, sir. I want to acknowledge my colleagues in the room. We are joined by Councilor Asabi George and Councilor Matt O'Malley. Thank you so much for your support, for your partnership. I want to thank all of my colleagues on the council. Many folks are busy and can't be here, but thank you for your input. Thank you for your ideas, your suggestions, your questions, your pushback, whatever it was that you did to participate in this process. It meant a lot. I also want to acknowledge the chair of the committee, Michael Flaherty. He's not here, but I want to acknowledge him as well. Someone who is not here, who I want to lift up, is a former colleague, my sister in service, Ayanna Presley. Yes, give it up for Ayanna Presley. While she was on this body, the Boston City Council, she was clear and unapologetic about her fight for equity. And this harvest, I'm going to call this a harvest, that we are reaping now are from the seeds that she planted. And no pun intended with harvest and seeds, but. So thank you, Congresswoman Presley. My own staff, my incredible staff who are all here. My chief of staff is here. Where are you, Samuel? Where are you? All of my staff that are here, please wave. But there's someone in particular that I want to highlight who's no longer on my team. Where are you? Here he is. Noah Coolidge, who is my former policy and communications director. Noah was my campaign manager in 2017. He was on my team all the way up until July of this year when he decided he wanted to go to grad school. Go figure. I don't know. But Noah, thank you so much for your leadership and your hard work bringing voices together and getting us to this point. I really appreciate you. Shalene Title is with us today. And so I want to highlight, please stand up. Please stand up. Shalene Title, she has She has been an incredible voice for equity, relentless in her fight for equity. She's been a great partner. She's been an advocate. She's been a resource for me. Thank you so much for your work. And I have to thank the many advocates and activists and entrepreneurs who are all in this space. And while they are trying to open up shops and they're spending their time and their resources and their money trying to do that, they still gave time and attention to this. And this is so important that we are here today. And I want to acknowledge there are groups like EON that is represented here. There are groups like MRCC. I'm not sure if they're here. We've got BECMA in the house. We have Alchemy, so I want to acknowledge Alchemy for their work. There are so many advocates in this space, many of whom are also entrepreneurs, but because they're not in this just so they can get their business off the ground. They care about equity and they want us all to win. So I really appreciate the work that you guys do. While I'm thanking people, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my good friend and colleague in the state government, Russell Holmes. Give it up for Russell Holmes, who's been a strong advocate and supporter of this, understanding what this means, particularly for communities of color and Black and Latinx community and how we have been criminalized and targeted. So thank you for lifting that up. And speaking of that, the criminalization of Black and brown people, and those of us who are tackling that issue and trying to dismantle, as you acknowledged, Mayor, the pipeline to prison, certainly our esteemed, wonderful, amazing Suffolk County District Attorney. Thank you so much for being here. But also thank you because, as the mayor has already said, this is an important step when it comes to economic development, and there are a lot of other initiatives that the city is working on in that space. But we also have to do everything that we can to dismantle this pipeline to prison that continues to target and criminalize Black and brown people, particularly our young people. And it takes all of us working together on the economic side, on the criminal justice side, to really make a difference. So thank you for being here. So while we all know that Massachusetts was not the first state to legalize in our country, it was the first state to mandate equity. Yes. And as I have stated from the beginning of this process, a year ago when we had our first hearing, it is so important to make sure that communities that have been locked up are not locked out of this economic opportunity to build wealth in their communities, but also to break the cycle of generational poverty. And with both the mayor and the council emphasizing the importance of equity, that is what we're doing today. So thank you. We are creating a process that promotes equity, clarity, transparency, and accountability, and one that prioritizes small local companies with diverse ownership from communities disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. What we know from this ordinance is that half the licenses in Boston, and we know we're going to have a minimum of 52. With this ordinance, half of them will be for equity applicants. Through the equity program here in Boston, we are creating this equity fund where we will grow this fund to up to $5 million, which is very exciting. It is the first in the Commonwealth, and we should acknowledge that. Yes, indeed. And I want to thank the mayor again for his commitment and his investment, because we cannot do this work without investing in the people who are on the front lines, who are trying to open up these shops. So thank you again for that. In addition to the equity program and the fund, this ordinance includes criteria for how we judge all applicants. It includes a public registry, and it calls for the creation of a new board, which you heard the mayor speak to. I am so thrilled to be able to continue to work with the mayor as he puts together this executive order. He so far has been very open to hearing the ideas that folks have when it comes to this board, and I know that he is too committed to equity and getting the right people on this board so that we can move forward in this process. So thank you again for that. Throughout this entire process, it was very clear that we could not afford to be stewards of the status quo. Instead, Boston is leading the way in our efforts to be intentional in creating an inclusive economy by putting in place a process that prioritizes equity and offers the clarity, transparency, and accountability that both aspiring entrepreneurs and the residents of our city deserve. And with this ordinance and the work that follows, because we're not going to solve 400 years of oppression with one ordinance, right? All right, so with this ordinance and the work that follows, we can ensure that the cannabis industry will be inclusive for those who are harmed by prohibition of marijuana, and we can begin to repair the harms and right the wrongs that have been inflicted by mass incarceration. Finally, with this ordinance, and this is just one step, as I want to make clear that we have to take to ensure equity, but we are taking a major step. And so I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on the council. I look forward to working with the mayor and his team, and I want to acknowledge there are people on his team who are part of this process and very helpful. So you've heard earlier from the Chief of Economic Development, John Barros is here. We've got the Chief of Civic Engagement, Jerome Smith. Alexis is here from the Office of Emerging Industries, and many others on the mayor's team. So I want to acknowledge them as well. But again, I want to come back and ground us with the advocates and the entrepreneurs who are in this space, who every day are spending tens of thousands of dollars trying to enter in this space, and not just, again, for themselves, but are trying to create a pathway for all of us to win in this, and I believe that we can. So I encourage us to continue to work together. There's much more work to do. Again, I want to thank the mayor and his team and all of my colleagues on the council and the state government, but particularly the entrepreneurs and the advocates for all of your work and your commitment to equity. Thank you so much. Let's get to signing. And after the signing, I just want to alert people, we will do a picture, yes, Mayor?
Yes, we will.
And then we have cake back in my office for those who want cake. Yes, thank you. Here?
Chauncey, I know you're recording. But get in here. There you go. There you go.
We get pens? Sure.